Are we there?
Alive.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's 11 o'clock and we are continuing our Senate Transportation Committee review this morning. And our next item is the Vermont Clean Water Initiative, Stormwater and Water Quality Coordination Efforts in the Roadways. And I think we have 4 or 5 folks with us this morning. And the first one I have on our list is Emily Bird. I don't know if you'd like to lead off or others. Who would like to start?
Sure, I can start, Senator Mazza.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us in this morning. For the record, my name is Emily Bird, and I'm the Clean Water Initiative Program Manager at the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. And I'm joined this morning by Helen Carr, who is our non-point source solution coordinator. And Helen is going to be presenting for you all on our annual performance report that summarizes the statewide efforts in clean water improvement projects, covering both the investment reporting requirements that are in statute, as well as some of our federal reporting requirements. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it over to Helen Carr.
Okay. Morning.
Thank you.
Morning, Helen.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
So hopefully this works out and present. Okay. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, thanks for that introduction, Emily, and it's good to be here. Again, my name is Helen Carr, and I'm with the Clean Water Initiative Program at DEC. And okay, so our program coordinates clean water funding, implementation, tracking, and accountability across state government. So today I'm going to talk to you about those efforts within the context of the transportation sector. So for a little bit of background, we know that Vermonters value clean water because it provides access to safe drinking water, improves property values, and supports recreation and tourism. While a lot of our waters are of high quality, some of our waters suffer from excess pollution, such as sediment and nutrients from the landscape. Excess nutrients like phosphorus in our lakes can cause an imbalance, which can lead to unsightly and potentially harmful cyanobacteria blooms, as seen in these photos here. The blooms can be harmful to health as well as impact the economy. So in order to mitigate these issues, clean water restoration plans have been established. These plans are referred to as Tmdls, or total maximum daily loads, and they identify pollutant reductions necessary for a water to meet our Vermont water quality standards. So if you look at this map, you can see that the areas in green are the Lake Champlain Basin and the Lake Memphremagog Basin. And these waters are impaired for phosphorus. And on the eastern side of the state, shown in blue, this area drains to the Connecticut River, and that eventually drains to the Long Island Sound, where a nitrogen imbalance can lead to low oxygen in the water, affecting aquatic life. So the state is committed to implementing clean water projects in order to reduce nutrient and sediment pollution statewide.
Yep.
Can I ask you a
quick question? I've
Sure.
seen this map before, and I can't remember if I've heard why it's phosphorus, to the west and north, and nitrogen to the Connecticut River.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's it's a lot of complex science, but it tends to be that in
Yeah, I wondered if there was a short answer. I don't want to get us too far down into it.
Yeah, the short answer is it tends to be that in lakes, the limiting nutrient is phosphorus. And once you go out into the ocean and the estuaries, it tends to be nitrogen. That's the limiting factor, nutrient.
I would just assume that the phosphorus would be washing off both ways, or the nitrogen both ways. So it's just something more about the waterways than the landscape.
Yeah, I think so.
Could it be the green areas are more prone to have manure spread on them, where the blue areas could be more of a chemical fertilizer more than as much as anything, or doesn't matter that way?
Yeah, if I may just jump in here, I'll just clarify that there is, when we have this polluted runoff, whether it's in Champlain Basin or Connecticut River Basin, that runoff may contain both phosphorus and nitrogen. It's more of an issue of the receiving water, and fresh water, as Helen mentioned, phosphorus tends to be the nutrient that drives these kinds of blooms, where in the salt water in the Long Island Sound, it's the receiving water body where nitrogen is what may cause an imbalance in the blooms in the system, or excess plant growth that can then lead to low dissolved oxygen. So it's a matter of the receiving waters and how they respond to the different types of nutrient pollution.
So it isn't that the green maps and the blue maps, the green maps do not have nitrogen, they do have, and the blue maps have phosphorus. It's just a matter of where that water is dumping out to what is most critical of trying to avoid.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily.
Senator Engel, you're right on that.
You just asked me, okay?
Oh, I'm right now. Thank you.
Okay.
The Lake Bend for Magog's right, on that map, so. Do you
Yeah,
have a camp or a house
I
on
do, yeah.
on the lake?
Yeah,
Is it green like that?
it is not, no, it's nice and clear, pristine.
That isn't your front yard or your
That-
view then?
That isn't,
Oh,
no.
I think these are pretty extreme photos, just to show you what it could look like.
Wow, look at that.
We ship that water to Canada.
Magog though is, we took a cruise.
Yeah.
That's a pretty large, and of course.
It
the
is,
one
yeah,
that's
it's
in
32
Canada.
miles, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
And maybe you'll get there, and I don't want to get ahead of your presentation, but if I could just put a question out there so we could get there. I keep on hearing we have a group that is, I don't know how accurate the information is, and they just keep on telling us that we're pretty close to a lake in crisis on Lake Memphremagog. Maybe this is not where we handle that, or if you have any thoughts about that at some time, I'd be curious of hearing what your takes are on the health of Lake Memphremagog.
Sure. Yeah, that is a bit beyond the scope of today's presentation.
And I'm fine to not talk about that.
Would be happy to follow up internally with the correct folks if you're interested in having them in to discuss with your committee, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I'll go ahead and move on.
Or we,
Yeah. Well, we hijacked this.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. So this slide is kind of showing our state's clean water initiative and how it's coordinated. These are kind of the steps that we take. So first, the Vermont Clean Water Board runs a public process to recommend allocation of clean water funding annually. That recommendation goes through a legislative process, and funds are eventually appropriated to state agencies that administer clean water funding programs. Those agencies use planning processes, including a framework known as as tactical basin planning, in order to identify and prioritize projects. And basin planning integrates the results of planning efforts across all land use sectors, including road erosion inventories under the MRGP. So then the state agencies fund clean water projects across all sectors. For example, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets funds agricultural practices, VTrans funds road improvement projects, and so forth. So agencies also compel implementation of projects through regulatory programs, such as the Municipal Roads General Permit, or MRGP, as I will probably refer to it. and also the Ts4 permit, which is VTrans's Transportation Separate Storm Sewer System permit. And then lastly, our program coordinates across state government to track and report these data annually in the Clean Water Initiative Annual Performance Report. So I will get into what's in that report in the coming slides. So this report was released in January of this year, as it is every year. And this current 2021 report covers state fiscal year 2016 through 2021. And kind of the main purpose of the report is to summarize Vermont's clean water efforts and to demonstrate results of investments, educational programs, and regulatory programs. This figure here shows that the report is divided into chapters based on geographic region, Chapter 2 being the summary of the entire state or statewide results, while Chapter 3 focuses on Champlain and Chapter 4 on
Helen, I have a question.
Sure.
It seems like when you're talking about progress, it seems like, because we had asked the question about when we would start seeing significant impact, and we were told it's going to take a long, long time. So my question is, when you're talking about contributing to progress, is it even measurable from 1 year to the next, or does it take 5 years? I mean, what's a reasonable time span to expect getting some return? I was reading the report on Lake Carmi, and the aeration and that, and in fact, I think the nitrogen level was a bit higher. There was a problem with the equipment and not working and so forth. So my question is, when you're talking about, you've got 16 through 21, but how are you able to measure and impute to each intervention what that impact was?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in part of the reason we do all of this tracking and keep track of and report on all of these measures, not only phosphorus, but also other measures that I'll get to in the next slide, is so that we can show the kind of incremental process, the efforts that we're putting into this clean water, even though it might take, there's several other environmental factors that really affect what's going to actually be reflected in the lake itself. So we're showing here with this report all the efforts that we're contributing that are eventually going to make an impact on the lake. If that makes sense. Emily can jump in if
Helen's going to get to some of what those measures look like that we're tracking at the project level year to year. And you can see when you see some of those figures, you'll be able to see the ramping up of this work that's been happening over the last 6 years, which is pretty significant. And we're working to estimate at the project level the pollutant reductions associated with these projects. But you're spot on. I think that was Senator Kitchell, that it's going to take a long time for these larger water bodies to respond because of the scale of the systems and how they've been on the receiving end of excess nutrients for decades. And so it will likely take decades for them to recover, but we do expect to see some incremental progress heading in the right direction. We're under a 20-year implementation timeframe for this work for Lake Champlain, for example. So we hope to achieve the phosphorus reductions going into the lake in that 20-year timeframe, but then it may even take longer than that for the lake to respond. And then layer on top of that, there are other environmental factors, landscape factors like development or loss of forest land or climate impacts that could also impact the ability of Lake Champlain to fully recover in a near term. So we're continuing to monitor some of those other variables and keeping an eye on how that might impact our ability to meet these targets. And addressing that as part of our iterative planning cycle through tactical basin planning. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, did that answer?
Stop. I think we're good.
Okay, great.
You're there testing it out.
So the last thing,
Immediately.
Go right ahead.
okay, so the last thing I'll touch on is that this report's also submitted to EPA to demonstrate how our funding programs, regulatory programs are contributing to this progress that we've been talking about with respect to the goals of the Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog TMDLs. And I will move on. So this is a table that I pulled right from our performance report, page 30. And it summarizes the statewide outputs of stormwater and road remediation projects. So there's quite a bit of information here, but we'll zoom in on a couple of pieces here. These top measures are focused on kind of results of state funding programs. So for example, if we're looking at the road project output measures, those are mainly going to be coming from the Municipal Roads Grants and Aid Program, as well as the V-Trans Better Roads Program. So those two programs from state fiscal year to 2016 to 2021 have resulted in 260 miles of municipal road drainage and erosion control improvements across the state. In addition, they also address things like road drainage and stream culvert replacements, and over the years, about 784 of those have been completed.
So we know what interventions, how do we know what they accomplished? Now, I see you've got cubic yards of
Gully erosion.
like gully erosion. Like in 21, that's only 5 cubic yards. In other words, how do you arrive at those figures?
Would you like me to jump in, Helen, on some of that?
Sure, you can.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Jim Ryan, and I run the Municipal Roads General Permit. I'm scheduled to speak in a little bit, but just wanted to answer that specific question. We have a very comprehensive road inventory process where we divide up all municipal roads into 100-meter segments or 328 feet, and we analyze whether or not the needed practices are in place at that part of the road cross-section, and we score them, each 328-foot segment of road, and we give them a score of fully, partially, or does not meet based on the percent of practices in place and degree of erosion in place. So a lot of what we see here are segments that did not meet our standards or didn't have the right practices in place or had some ongoing erosion, and the grant funding in a lot of cases, or just towns, labor and equipment addressing these issues, brought those roads up to our standards. And I believe in years past, we've had Dr. Beverly Wemple testify here and give presentations on the water quality benefits of installing those practices that we require towns to install. So that's the quick snapshot answer there, and I'll stop talking so Helen can get back to her presentation.
Okay, so in other words, there is if you're saying if you bring that segment up to the standards, inherent in doing that is a measurable impact, and that there is science behind how you say, well, for each segment it will achieve X. We're not going in and testing the water or anything like that. It's just that there's evidence that will tell you what the return is for implementing that standard.
Exactly, Senator Kitchell. Exactly.
But so on your next, on the next slide, it shows.
Oh, you're ahead of us again.
Well, it might help to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I can talk more specifically about phosphorus on the next slide.
Oh, she loves phosphorus. Huh? Okay.
So yeah, so I guess generally these are just measures that we use. They're a standard set of measures that we use across funding programs. Funding programs report back to us on these measures so we can show, even if there isn't an immediate phosphorus reduction, we want to show like all the efforts that have been put into these stormwater and road practices. So in addition, we have listed some regulatory measures, and as Jim was discussing, I'll just note that our data show that about 90% or maybe more than 90% of our hydrologically connected municipal roads have been inventoried, so they've been assessed. And of those, it's about 42% were identified as requiring improvements to meet MRGP standards.
I was with a town of Irisburg. They used to come in with a computer, and they would show our progress on those roads, and they had every culvert on there, every upgrade that had occurred, and what really needed to be identified was red, and then it was amazing on what they have for information. Very impressive.
Why do some towns have to pay a stormwater tax like Colchester?
But you got a utility.
Why are we singled out for the tax?
Well, if we didn't have the stormwater utility, the individual property owners would have to pay for their own mitigation. So in a way, it's a collective effort to manage the stormwater.
Not every town does this though. Why isn't every town involved?
I think with the towns with a lot more pavement, you usually see the efficiencies of pooling across different parcel owners.
Must be impervious surface that they're looking at.
So if you've got a bunch of developed properties and you want to pool their efforts to mitigate, then you need an entity to oversee it all. But if you have more parcels where you can put the stormwater mitigation on your own land, you don't need a utility to share resources. That's my understanding. Yeah.
But then,
that makes sense to the person.
but then you're financing it individually as opposed to collectively.
Right. Right. For the collective good, the service of government.
But the taxpayers in that particular town pay, the other towns don't pay.
Yeah, but not from the property tax. It's a separate enterprise fund, just like the airport. So it generates all its own money from those subscribers that have paid for their water bills. So on the water bill to get water, you also pay a stormwater fee. And there's impact.
Ours is like mine was $5,000 just recently. So.
Wow.
To your town?
Yeah, I have to pay for the stormwater. Yeah. I often wondered why Colchester, South Burlington, is it only two of them for the area?
No, Williston's got one, I believe.
Williston, I think, yeah, Williston. Yeah. I'm sorry, go right ahead. I'm sorry, I just got sidetracked here.
We hijacked you again. Apologize.
That's a fairly significant 5,000.
Williston, yeah.
Do you have a lot of impervious? Is it based on
Yeah, I
impervious?
don't know. I just pay the bill. I don't know what it is.
To any of the experts on the line, if I just explain that incorrectly, please correct me.
I think that sounded correct to me. Yeah, I think we see some.
We should have
I think
presentation.
it was correct, and I will add that those municipalities, the larger ones, are subject to a special permit called an MS4 permit. And Jen will talk to the equivalent Ts4 permit that VTrans falls under, but that's why they have this collective responsibility to address stormwaters because of the MS4 permit.
For the record, Colchester, just after 3 tries, we just passed the sewer along the lake.
Oh, did you finally?
Yeah, but just phase 1 of all the lakeshore property, you're gonna have sewer. We just passed it last week after 3 tries because of federal money, and the only people that'll pay is the users, not everyday taxpayers.
And Catherine, on that point about the MS4, is that based on the municipalities that need that permit? It's based on impervious surface area or something else?
I think it's a combination of that and population.
And does Rutland, wasn't there some discussion about where Rutland fell in terms of being an MS4 community? You remember any of that? No?
Yes, I believe there is some work underway to address, I'm blanking on if it's Rutland Town or Rutland City, but working to get MS4 permit coverage as well. And I believe there is a stormwater impaired water in the Rutland area that will require some flow reductions through implementation of stormwater treatment practices. And that work is, I believe, underway with DEC stormwater program. So if there's more detail, if you're interested in more detail on that, I could follow up with the experts at DEC to get back to you on that.
Burlington has a stormwater ordinance too. I just think if that comes down to the pavement, the more pavement you have, closer to parcel paved next to each other, it makes more sense.
Population density probably as well with that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest in water quality in the transportation committee.
So, yeah, so that we're just a little down.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on in this sector. It all kind of comes back to phosphorus, and that's really a big driving force here. And if we, in this figure that I have up now, we're showing, based on our tracking, the estimated total phosphorus load reductions. This is just within the Lake Champlain Basin by sector. So in total, an estimated 34.8 metric tons, which equates to about 77,000 pounds of total phosphorus loading, have been reduced as of state fiscal year 2021. So kind of, if you look, each of the different colors in this chart represent a different sector, and all of the yellow is associated with the agriculture sector. There's a sliver of green, that's natural resources. There is orange, that is stormwater specific, and then we did call out the very top slice is red, and that's associated with road projects. So yeah, I can just note that it's pretty clear that most of the phosphorus reductions that we're seeing are resulted from agricultural practices, and there are a couple of different reasons for that. But the main one being that these practices are funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service. So they contribute a pretty significant amount of funding to get these practices on the ground. It's also important to note that most of the agricultural reductions were associated with annual practices. So for example, practices like cover crop or manure injection only have a 1-year lifespan. So that means if this level of effort is not maintained each year, phosphorus reductions will not carry through to future years. In contrast, structural projects such as stormwater treatment practices or road remediation projects have longer term lifespans on the order of 10 to 20 years. If they're properly maintained. So if those phosphorus reductions will continue in future years. Yeah, so we are seeing steady progress being made each year in phosphorus reductions. But we still have a little ways to go before we're meeting the Tmdl.
Okay. Go ahead.
With CARD, is the reduction on the phosphorus, the Tmdl, I guess there's two questions. Is the EPA satisfied with this estimated tons of phosphorus? Does that meet the requirement? Or do we actually do measurement in the lake? Or both?
I could respond to the EPA piece. We have submitted this report to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for their review on January 15th, and we are awaiting our report card for this year from EPA. They look at our progress in from a few different perspectives, but so far they have determined that we are on track for meeting our goals and are satisfied with the efforts that the state is doing. That's based on last year's report card. So we're awaiting this updated report card. And I'll just highlight that these estimates are based on project level data. So these are estimates that we model based on the project's performance in addressing phosphorus pollution. And that we are also monitoring water quality and how water quality is responding. But we do not have the resources to be able to monitor water quality impact for all these projects. So we take this modeled estimate approach. And this helps us to demonstrate the reductions we expect that are happening across the landscape, acknowledging that it will take time for the lake to respond to these reductions.
But Emily, are there actual measurements of phosphorus in the lake that goes along with these?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is a long-term monitoring program that the Lake Champlain Basin Program coordinates with our Lakes and Ponds program at DEC. And there is long-term data related to phosphorus in Lake Champlain.
I know with interest, your most reductions result from agricultural practices. And we are getting, I'm speaking as someone on appropriations, requests from the conservation districts to have more financial support for their work in an ongoing, predictable way than simply from grants from clean water. So it's kind of interesting to see that in fact, the impact of the work that's done through the conservation services in terms of Lake Champlain. And it really, I'm trying to connect that with maybe we should, I don't know, look at, and this isn't the right discussion place, I'm sure, but whether out of that clean water funding every year, rather than throwing it in and, you know, you get a grant and the amount is unpredictable, if we should have some set amount of support, because it seems to me that what this slide shows is the work in that agricultural sector and through USDA, which they get funding as well, is actually a very good investment relative to the reductions that are being experienced in Lake Champlain. So you don't need to respond to that, but I'm just saying that we've got, I can't remember what it is, an increase to the appropriation. And it's very hard from a budget perspective to say, well, go and compete. And then we're funding the Clean Water Fund, and we've actually dedicated revenues for that. And then we have a major provider of services that are resulting in it saying, well, we want more funding. And so we layer it on top of already what we've already allocated, as opposed to should we, within that pot of money, designate more for that particular sector of work. That's just, I'm just throwing that out, and you don't need to respond because I realize it gets you into a budgetary area, but our ability to add on to what and then say go and compete for grants really does add for instability. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Or to add further that, to add on to something that's already being done, and they just want to be able to do it themselves, but it's already the data that the new people that are applying for money has already been determined, and so are you duplicate spending.
Well, I know, and the extent to which we can make it additive is frankly limited. So that's when we're talking about ongoing state funding. So that's why I was struck by your by that bullet that would say that in fact those investments in that area have produced most of the phosphorus reductions, which is to me, you know, a fairly powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in, Senator? Just a quick comment. One thing that might be a little misleading on the bar chart, when Act 64 kicked in, for example, I'll just speak to stormwater municipal roads. the permit was not issued until January of 2018, and we had to give towns several years to conduct their road erosion inventory, so we're properly prioritizing road remediation projects for the money spent and for sediment and phosphorus reductions. And this last year, 2021, was the first year of required implementation, and henceforth we have a certain percent of roads that have to be upgraded each year. So of the numbers that we're seeing for roads in the first several bars here of years are all voluntary and grant funded only projects. The regulatory requirements haven't yet kicked in. And we, even for last year's work, towns still have another month or so before they have to report the work that they did. So those numbers are going to greatly increase. Just wanted, for a little context, the USDA had been kind of, projects had been ongoing ahead of even before Act 64 requirements. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
On the Barton River in Coventry, on the Coventry Station crossing, there's a apparatus, a box with an antenna and a solar panel and all of that. Is that as Senator Perchlik was asking, is that a monitoring site for phosphorus or what have you? It's upriver from the dump that's there. So I don't think it's anything to do with monitoring what the dump might have effect on, but are you familiar with that? If you're not a big deal.
Not familiar with that specific site, but what you're describing does sound like one of the stream gauge stations that are sprinkled across the state for monitoring water quality and flow parameters. So that may be the case. I'm just not familiar with that site specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping an eye out for things like that across your area. That's great.
That's where I cannonball off the bridge to the delight of all the neighborhood kids.
Okay. To keep moving on here and kind of speaking to your questions about state cost, we do have a chart in the report that looks at this cost effectiveness of some of these projects, and it kind of speaks to another reason why a lot of the agricultural or the phosphorus reductions are attributed to agriculture is because generally those are the most cost-effective practices. And by cost effectiveness, we mean the state cost per kilogram of total phosphorus load reduced. So in other words, that represents the cost to reduce 1 kilogram of total phosphorus. So if we look at, we can see that across the different sectors, we have different cost effectiveness. The most expensive projects are the stormwater projects, and road remediation projects have quite a range of cost effectiveness, but most of them are centered around the median, which is about $1,620 per kilogram of phosphorus reduced. Any questions there? Keeping it short. I know we're a little behind schedule, so I only have one more slide to get through, and that is really just to inform you that we have several online tools that can help you dive a little bit deeper if you're interested. The first is the Clean Water Interactive Dashboard, and that is a pretty cool tool that summarizes the funding, the project outputs, and the phosphorus reductions, but it allows you to filter by your county or by watershed or by sector. So you can click on any of these colored shapes, and that filters all of the data by those shapes. So it's pretty cool. It can be found through our Clean Water portal, although I don't believe it's working at the moment. And similarly, we have a Clean Water Project Explorer, which allows you to kind of look at all the individual projects that have been funded or implemented across the state. So that was all I had. And
Okay, who's next?
yeah,
Jennifer?
I can.
So I'm next. I'm just gonna
We get to the Agency of Transportation.
This will stop. I'm just gonna try, I'm trying to share my screen here. I think,
Stop share. Maybe that
I think
helps.
I stopped you by sharing mine.
Oh.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, as you said, I am Jen Callahan and I'm with V-Trans in the Maintenance and Fleet Division, the Water Quality Unit. I'm going to talk about our phosphorus control implementation plans. But briefly, just before I do that, I just wanted to show you our water quality fact sheet. I have often in the past come in. We update these every year.
We're not gonna read that.
We're having a little trouble with this.
Yeah, I don't expect you to read it. I just wanted to bring it up, and I usually come in and it's the blue sheet. I don't know if you remember that, that we talk about we update it annually. I submitted it as part of my testimony, and so I'm just going to let you peruse it on your own time as you wish. But I'm not going to get too into it today. What I do want to talk about is just a reminder of our Ts4 permit. It's come up a couple times as we've been talking. And it is in kind of an umbrella federal permit administered by the state. And it's applicable to all V-Trans right-of-way and owned, controlled, and leased land, except for rail and public transit. It takes into account it takes in all of our operational stormwater permits. And so those are the MS4 permit. Again, we've talked about that a few times, which includes all of our land within Burlington, Colchester, Essex Junction, Milton, Rutland Town, Shelburne, South Burlington, St. Albans City and Town, Williston, and Winooski. And so that's under the MS4, and that has things like public education and participation, training and education, asset mapping, spill prevention. Also under the Ts4 permit is our multi-sector general permit. It's an industrial permit, and it covers our state airports and gravel pits. We also have the state operational stormwater permit under that Ts4 permit, and it regulates stormwater runoff from construction, expansion, and redevelopment of impervious surfaces greater than an acre currently. But as of, I believe, July of this year, it's actually going to be a half an acre of impervious surface or greater is going to fall under that permit. And then finally, what we're here to talk more about is our Tmdl requirements fall under the Ts4 permit. And for us, a lot of that is for our stormwater pollutants and phosphorus pollutants, and mainly here to talk about the Lake Champlain phosphorus Tmdl.
Okay.
So our phosphorus control plan, that's a requirement of our Ts4 permit. It requires us to reduce phosphorus loading from our roads, rights of way, and facilities by over 20% by June of 2036. And so just a sense of what that looks like in the whole basin, that's 1,374 miles of highway and 417 acres of impervious surface at our parcel-based facilities.
Wow, costs a lot of money to build that.
So per the Ts4, we had to develop a generalized phosphorus control plan, which looked at the entire basin and came up with a general plan of how we would meet those requirements. The generalized plan was more of a desktop analysis with some field verification, and we did complete that and submit it in April of 2020. And then after that, we were required to develop four-year phosphorus control implementation plans that detail how we will implement 25% of our TMDL in each of those plans. These involve a lot of field work. Have more site-specific information. And we did complete the first one, and it was submitted in October of 2020 to the Agency of Natural Resources. And then we'll have 3 more that we need to complete in 2024, 2028, and 2036, or 2032, sorry. So that first plan that we submitted, it's focused on the Missisquoi River Basin, but it takes into account all the work we do basin-wide also. And as I said, it reduces or it achieves 25% of our TMDL target, which is 401 kilograms per year. So how are we going to do that? Generally speaking, there are 5 different categories of BMPs that we are using to meet those requirements. One of them is a correction of road drainage deficiencies. It's very similar to the MRGP standards, but it's tailored to our state roads. Improvement of road drainage can include things like ditching or culvert and outfall repair or replacement. We'll do correction of localized erosion issues. So it'll be stabilization and treatment of areas of erosion specifically caused by roadway runoff. Non-structural practices like street sweeping and catch basin cleaning. Structural BMPs. These are our traditional stormwater BMPs that we talked about, like gravel wetlands and sand filters. And then finally, we're considering natural resource restoration projects. They're not very common right now, but they have a lot of potential as a much more cost-effective way of reducing phosphorus, things like floodplain reconnection and restoration. So we're looking into those also. I will say that we prioritize the road drainage deficiency upgrades, as we found that those tend to be, with the exception of the natural resource projects, they're, as Helen had mentioned before, they tend to be the most cost effective in reducing our phosphorus and have a lot of co-benefits.
On the previous slide, so VTrans doesn't do catch basin cleaning or street sweeping. So is this just what we're mandating of our municipalities?
No, we actually do that. we do street sweeping for a lot of reasons. Some of it's water quality, some of it's to clear the way for bikes and make it safer for bikes. And we have to clean out our catch basins. It's important for the infrastructure to maintain it, to do that.
That goes all to the cities. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we do that also.
Volunteer.
Okay. So finally, that brings me to our St. Albans Highgate PCIP project, we're calling it. This project was developed utilizing funds appropriated last year in Act 55. It's going to focus on the I-89 corridor in the Missisquoi Bay Lake segment from St. Albans to the Canadian border. The appropriated money will be directed to the design and construction of culvert repairs, soil restoration, and localized erosion mitigation, primarily at culvert outlets. We will look at structural stormwater treatment practices where it makes sense. But like I said, to get kind of the most bang for the buck, we are prioritizing road upgrades. This project is in early development right now, but we're anticipating construction to be in 2023 to 2024. So this is kind of a good example of what we foresee to be going forward. So far, we've been doing a lot of looking at our everyday maintenance and our projects and quantifying the phosphorus reduction for those. But this is an example of the type of projects that we are going to be going forward with in order to meet those requirements for the phosphorus control plans. That's pretty much all that I had to share. If you have any questions, I can take them, or we can run off to Jim to talk about the MRGP.
Okay, we've only got a few more minutes left, so who would like to go next? Sorry, we didn't plan on that long, so that's good. No problem.
That's fine. We'll let Jim take it over then.
Okay. Jennifer, good morning.
No, it's Jim.
Jim, oh, Jim, okay. All right, I'm sorry.
Good morning, folks. Can folks see that?
Yep, so far.
Yep.
The church meeting.
No, recovery class.
All right. And I'm Jim Ryan. I work with Vermont DEC in the stormwater program and run the municipal road stormwater. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff that I had that I think Helen and Emily covered earlier. Just for a little context, Act 64 required DEC to develop and implement the first ever municipal road stormwater general permit in the state. And honestly, there's not many of these across the country that I can find. Due to address some of the modeling that had been done for Lake Champlain watershed as part of the TMDL, you can see on the slide here, we have 6% of phosphorus coming from roads, from unpaved roads, and 14% coming overall from stormwater. We talk a lot about phosphorus, but there's also sediment, trace heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and road salt that are addressed as part bringing roads up to the standards. One of these benefits that we don't talk about a whole lot, when we see roads that did not have required practices on them and we put them in place, we can document that by doing before and after assessments during road erosion inventories. We're greatly increasing our flood resilience. We have increasing flash flood events, highly localized, dropping several inches of rain in a small area, just devastating the transportation infrastructure. And we see firsthand from towns that we're seeing when properly sized culverts are in place, the roads are crowned, we have proper ditching, that these roads better withstand the flood events that we're getting. Just for some context in the timeline here, the MRGP was issued in January 2018 after 2 years of very thoughtful preparation with our stakeholders in developing the permit. And we gave towns 3 field seasons to prepare and conduct their road erosion inventories. We actually gave them a couple of years even before the permit was issued, so we can get a snapshot of the conditions of our roads, municipal roads. And on the timeline there, the road inventories were due December 2020. We have 95% of municipalities covered by the MRGP have completed their road erosion inventories. Now we're in the implementation stage starting in 2021, so last field season, into 2022, where we give the requirement that towns have to upgrade 15% of their non-compliant roads. So they have to put in the practices that are required in the first 2 years of implementation, so 2021, 2022. Quick snapshot, we here for MRGP, we have the highest compliance for any of our regulatory programs in DEC stormwater, 95% compliance for the road erosion inventory. First, we have to go out and we segmented roads into those 328-foot segments that I mentioned, that map on the upper left of your slide. The purple segments are what we consider connected, or roads that are close to water. Those are under the permit. Those are over 6,500 miles of town roads that we considered connected or close to water that are under the permit. We go out and assess each road segment, each 328-foot section of road. We go out and we prioritize, we put that data in a database or a portal, which is this kind of ongoing, maintained by towns and our stakeholder partners. And then roads are brought up to standards where implementation occurs. Each segment of road gets a score of fully, partially, or does not meet our standards. We have different standards for different road types. As you can see on the top right, I'm talking kind of fast as we go through here because we don't have much time. We developed a road erosion inventory app or application on the left of your screen there. Some regional planning commissions have developed similar apps that they use in the field. We developed a map layer that can be accessed through web-based or in the field through the app. You can see that map layer there with the purple segments again. You click on a segment, and that on the right of your screen, you can launch an inventory of your roads. Lots of towns that was mentioned earlier by one of the senators that are using this tool as a transportation asset management tool to keep track of where roads need to be upgraded, where towns have done work. Even if they're not connected or under the permit, they're using this as an asset management tool. What are connected roads?
Jim, can I ask you a quick question on that back?
Sure.
On hydrologically connected roads, maybe if you go back a slide. Because I was on the select board when this first came out, and I remember we were talking about hydrologically connected roads.
This slide, Senator?
Yeah, just because, am I right when that purple part of that map is what part of the road that needs the permit, not the yellow part, or that's just highlighted for another reason?
Oh, that's a slightly different map layer, but we have updated this map layer since this screenshot, where the roads are colored according to compliance score. So the red would not meet, was kind of the worst score. We also have a yellow score, and yes.
Well,
and
my
we have
question
different
more
scores for
my question is, like, it seemed at the time, my memory is, we didn't have any roads that weren't hydrologically connected. Like, are there roads that aren't hydrologically connected? Because it seemed like, what is the test to make it, to say it's hydrologically connected?
It's that proximity to a water resource in this slide here.
And so
if it's within 100 feet of a water resource, and that's a lake, pond, a wetland, or it bisects a water or drains to a water, as essentially the quick answer there.
Is there any road that doesn't bisect land that doesn't drain to a water resource?
Yes. The short answer, as far as this permit goes, or we could think of it as a spectrum of more connected to less connected. But we do have, if we think about kind of these at a very micro level, it's almost like a road watershed, if you will, from the top of a hill to a culvert at the bottom. And in some cases, there we have where water just sheds into the woods, and it cannot really get into a waterway. So we have about 55% of the waters that are considered connected.
55% of the roads are
55% of road segments are considered connected and under the permit.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and these are some of the questions that we asked. We have a good crowd.
You're right ahead. Yep.
Can water shed off the road? Do we have adequately sized ditches, or are they stone lined? If we have a steep slope, are your culverts stable and not eroding? It's a typical road cross section. In a lot of cases, we have flow from the upslope where you have to have a ditch on that side. Some cases we need some subsurface drainage, and in a lot of cases we have shedding or sheet flow on one side. In some cases we have ditches on both sides of the road. I just want to, Helen shared some numbers as far as water quality improvements to some roads. These are the latest as of this week. So those numbers have bumped up as towns have to report. We have a reporting deadline of April 1st that are coming. The numbers are changing every day. We have upgraded 328 miles of road since the permit kicked in that now meet our standards. The shot of our implementation table. I want to do a shout out to our partners. I'm a one-person program and couldn't do the work for the program without some of the partners here. And we have Catherine from Northwest RPC. The regional planning commissions have been integral, the League of Cities and Towns, the conservation districts, especially up in the Northeast Kingdom, VTrans, local roads, better roads programs, and district staff, and the Agency of Digital Services and other programs within DEC. We try to get word out to towns of requirements for the coming year. We send out an annual newsletter called What's New and Due for 2022. No pun on the rhyming there, but it goes over different grant funding and training opportunities and what requirements and fees are due during the year. And our collaboration with our partners that I mentioned, depending on where we are in the state, we found that towns like to have preferences in different organizations that they like to work with, whether it's the VTrans districts or the local roads program or better roads program or the regional planning commissions or myself. And some towns work with multiple partners for technical assistance or administrative assistance. We have grant funding for the inventories, implementation, and equipment grants. And we collaborate, the shot there, local roads program, doing a roads training for road crew members. We work very closely with the local roads on collaborative trainings, and which have shifted online during the pandemic. We're hoping they'll be out in the field this field season.
Thank you, Jim. I hate to rush, but we're getting wound down.
Okay, and this is a good segue to Catherine, because we're talking about also using the MRGP template for Agency of Natural Resources, forested roads and private roads. And just that one heads up, we're reissuing the permit next January. So we're in the process of coming up with some potential changes to the permit. So heads up for next session next year.
Thank you.
I guess we don't have time for Catherine.
Catherine, can we reschedule you?
I was just going to offer that I would be happy to come at another time.
Some of us got a noontime meeting, so if we can do that, I'm sorry, but that's.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm happy to come back another time.
Let Jeannie reschedule you.
Perfect.
Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, very interesting.
Okay, Jeannie,
For having us in.
live.